everyone. Today we'll do a video that maybe can be helpful for some of you, and I hope it is interesting. I will tell you how I started selling, which is my story, selling on Etsy specifically. I have been selling also in other platforms for many years, but my most part of e-commerce business it's inside Etsy. I opened my first Etsy store back in 2009. That is quite a long time ago. It was a disaster. It was awful. Also, it was the very beginning of Etsy, and many things were not completely clear inside the platform. And I started selling my photography. And of course, I did in Spain, in Madrid, Spain. So it's a long story. I didn't know exactly what to do. I didn't know anything about SEO. I didn't know anything about how properly marketing your products. I didn't know anything, really. And also, I had my job from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, 6 in the afternoon. So my Etsy was just like, okay, let me give a try to something that maybe will work, maybe not. But I didn't have too much interest on it, and once again I was trying to sell only my photography and my drawings and these kind of things. But at the same time, because I had been doing this for many years, I was buying in a street market things, all the stuff, vintage stuff that I liked for decorating my house and making my personal world interesting. So I was usually buying a lot in a very famous street market in the weekends called in Lavapiés in Madrid, with a lot of gypsies, a lot of many kind of people. But also in the area of Lavapiés, 14 years ago, there was a hub of antique sellers, some of them Chinese, some of them Spanish, from many places, that even if I bought many pieces, thinking back, I should buy everything I saw because it was relatively cheap. Many of these things that I bought in this small antiques store, I was able to resell for a lot of profit years later when I came to live in New York. After Spain, when I left Spain, I closed all my stores. I was like, I don't want to do anything like this. It was also consuming time, and I didn't get too much money for me. So I closed my Etsy, and I was living around a year and a half in Israel, where I was also buying a lot of stuff for me, but not thinking I would trade with this. Then 10 years ago I moved to Brooklyn, New York, and I didn't have family here. I didn't have friends, I didn't have anything. So I landed in New York with my wife, who was pregnant at that moment, and due to several circumstances, for the first year we were not able to work, to do anything. So what we used to do was to have long walks, really long walks. And these long walks endure even after we have our baby. In the first years of our baby, we used to go outside and have walks, especially in like mid-class or high rich neighborhoods, in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, and we were usually collecting stuff. I remember back then that in Saturdays, if I'm not wrong, one relative wealthy neighborhood near to us, Park Slope in Brooklyn, they used to have all the people living in Park Slope. They used to have like kind of the habit or tradition to put things that they didn't want from their houses in the street, with sometimes with text, for free, you can take it. And we used to go with our baby stroller and collect things like let's take this, let's take that. And we opened first one eBay store, and later we opened our first vintage store in Etsy. At the beginning, our idea was, okay, let's try to sell what we are collecting from the street that still look good and is cool. And we also start going to these kind of places like Goodwill or Salvation Army stores and trying to buy and resell things. Of course, on Etsy you need to be very careful with the age of the products, because if you are a vintage seller you need to sell things that are 25 years or older. So at the beginning we had few incidents in which the legal team of Etsy was sending us emails like, hey guys, this is not vintage. And of course we just took it out. Later we start very seriously having visits to thrift stores, to street markets, and picking things that we saw, okay, we can make a profit with this. What happened was that I think that many people do this mistake at the beginning, or even at later, because we didn't have enough money. We were really like counting every penny in our life. We thought, okay, you know what, we will try to buy bags of custom jewelry for a few dollars and try to sell them for a profit. But then what is the mistake, or what my experience is like, if you buy cheap and sell cheap, you are investing a lot of time per item, and the revenue you will get per item is very little. So, okay, we were spending, let's say, $20 for 20 pieces of jewelry, one example, and selling them for $3, $4, $5 per piece, because they were just like 1970s, 80s plastic brooches or earrings that they didn't have really a lot of value. Okay, you can think, yes, I did triple of my money. But because we were selling individually the pieces, like you buy a bag and you sell it then individually, you were doing, we didn't count the amount of time and efforts for putting every item on sale. And not only that, when you buy things cheap and sell cheap, you need to be thinking clearly that every 4 months when you are renewing your listing because it's not sold, you are spending anyway. So the only way in which selling cheap stuff is profitable is if your time is really irrelevant, you don't care, and if you can guarantee to yourself that all this cheap stuff will be sold immediately. If the cheap things start to be on the store for a long time, then they will be claiming some of this investment because you need to renew them, etc. One thing, because my ex-wife and I, we are also photographers, one thing that from the beginning we had very clear was to do the correct photos. Like, it's not doing with the phone, it's not doing with any random background. No, we bought a light box and we bought a very good camera. That was a big investment. We were doing really good photos. That first store that we opened, was really successful after 2 years. After 2 years, it was giving enough money for paying our rent and our food in New York City. We didn't have a great life, but it was good. It was good. Like, okay, we are home. We don't need to work for anyone. We don't have a boss. We don't have to commute. We have our daughter with us, our baby, and she's growing, and you're watching our daughter in our house. And it felt good, yeah. And this store that we opened back in 2013, it was generating the basic income necessary for feeding a family of 3 living in Brooklyn, New York. It grew, it became quite big. And when I say big for a vintage store, we had approximately, at certain points, 800 items listed. We did several tests, like, okay, let's have one store with 100 items. Let's see if we then move it up to 400 items. Then we move to 600 items. And then we move to 800, and I think at a certain moment we already had 1,000 items. 1,000 items with the according appropriate photos, the correct SEO, is a lot of work, massive. It's not like you are doing photos ping with the phone and putting. No. If you want to do a really good vintage store, you need to care about every detail, because you need to make it feel like trendy and cool and like a fashionista. But then we noticed that the amount of work compared with the revenue was not so juicy, so profitable in a huge store. In the same case with small store. So we moved to a middle amount, and we found that a good vintage store with around 500 listings average is a good amount. You can manage it, you can really do it good. Later many things happened, and we divorced, and my ex-wife kept this store, and I reopened a very old profile that I had, that we already created one, thinking, okay, instead of vintage, let's try to sell antiques. So we created a second store in which the thematics or the profile was more focused on very old items, 100 years plus items. And it was very interesting, because the same day that we opened that second store, we had the first sale, and it was really amazing, really like very quick. But we closed the store because it was too big for 2 persons managing these 2 large. And only when I divorced and I moved alone, I reopened the profile, and it's the store that I am trying to create now. That is a Brooklyn boutique shop, and I am doing all these videos for this new store. What I have noticed is that around 2018 to now, all the dynamics on Etsy had changed a lot. I can tell you something, and it's not a complaint, it's just like for me it is factual. Before, I'm talking 10 years ago, Etsy had a very close approach, friendly approach to the vintage sellers. And I understand why, because vintage sellers, many of good vintage sellers, brought to the community interesting items that were a source of inspiration. And also, I think that for Etsy it was good to have a very healthy vintage community selling on it, because it matched the ethical message of recycle, reuse, and it was good, it was pretty cool. But I think that 4 years ago, in 2018 approximately, I felt that Etsy lost some interest in the vintage community. And unfortunately for me, it was at the same time I was trying to rebuild my own business. And it had been particularly difficult, especially 2021 and the current 2022. I noticed that the vintage community on Etsy is quite left to its own without too much effort by the company. And it's adding a lot of struggle to sellers like me. But what we can do. Just working hard and trying to see if we can do even better. My store recently, like in the last year, had been partnering with proper antique sellers in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. So many of the pieces I am showing or I am explaining comes from very well-known antique dealers that they borrow or they give to me to make my talks in YouTube, or some of them are even in consignment, they are given to my store. I can talk many things about SEO, about how to do your business, etc. But I will do it in another video. Now I just want to tell you how I evolve, how things move from picking stuff from the streets to working with professionals, antique sellers. One thing I want to tell to everyone that is trying to create his own vintage or antique store on Etsy. Even if you have the goal to create your own business and supposedly it's completely independent, it is highly recommendable that you somehow create a sense of community around you, that you meet another vintage sellers, that you establish contact with people selling the same time you or similar to you, and stop thinking that every seller is a competitor and start thinking that other sellers in antiques and in vintage are precisely team members for you and you for them. If you can create a small group, a small community of friends selling in the same profiles on your Etsy, you will find a lot of support, and you will find also that this support can translate in benefits, in real benefits for your store. So don't miss that point. Yes, you want to make your store for you and you want to make your money, but it's very healthy for you and for your business if you find and if you join a small community of sellers like you